Central. Yes.
Thank you. This gentleman right here in the blue shirt.
Director Deutsch, I have a very simple way that you can prove to us that you intend to get to the bottom of these allegations. And that is the CIA in '81 was overrided under the Reagan administration. When President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12333, he set up a parallel government headed by George Bush, for which Ali North also worked, and they privatized U.S. intelligence. For example, the gentleman that he brought up, Weakley, not Alexander, but Weakley, Scott Weakley, who was said by the government to not be involved with the government, it turns out he was involved in a private operation as part of what's called the Bush asteroids. But you have a private network run by George Bush and Ali North, not the CIA. You won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ali North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross. Ricky Ross is doing George Bush's time.
Okay. All right, fine. I will have to tell you, because I cannot get some type of leverage here and some type of quietness here, I'm going to have to just take 4 more questions so that I can then... You are not responding to me. You are not responding to me at all. Therefore, I cannot respond to you. The gentleman in the back there, the one who has a...
I will instruct our Inspector General to investigate any allegation in this matter that is brought forward. If you bring forward an allegation to me, I will see that it's investigated. I have it right here, sir. Give it to the staff
members. Okay, hey, 1 second, please.
Sir,
1 second, please.
That was intended for the guy in the khaki jacket, and then you are next, the one who has the mic at this time.
Can I go ahead?
Friday Night Special.
For many, it was an allegation all too easy to believe. What began quietly as a newspaper series caught fire on the internet.
This is an American story. This is
Fueled by suspicion, it raged on talk radio.
There's just so much that ties into this.
We have been outraged.
The fury sparked hearings.
But it comes a time now that we sit down and really get down to the nitty-gritty of this issue.
In an historic event, the director of the CIA today came to South Central Los Angeles.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. It is a charge that cannot go unanswered.
But
how are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
tonight, crack and the CIA, conspiracy or myth.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
There is within the African-American community a high level of distrust of the federal government, and not without reason. In the 1930s, the U.S. Public Health Service recruited 400 poor and illiterate black men in Tuskegee, Alabama. The men, all of whom had syphilis, were told that they would receive treatment. They did not. Instead, they were simply monitored for the next 40 years as the effects of the syphilis destroyed their minds and bodies. In the 1960s, the FBI wiretapped the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., infiltrated the Black Panthers, wiretapped Malcolm X, When the issues were raised, they were routinely denied. There are many other examples of abuses by local, state, and federal authorities, the point being that when a few months ago a reporter for the San Jose Mercury News suggested in a series of articles that the CIA might have played a role in permitting Nicaraguan drug dealers to distribute crack cocaine in south central Los Angeles during the 1980s, that story had enormous resonance within the African American community.
This is not just a smoking gun, it is a smoking cannon that leads all the way to the White House.
If they had put that crack in Beverly Hills, it would be a presidential issue. We love our children just like you love yours.
I think it is enough information here to say to the CIA, you stand accused.
Reaction to the story split largely along racial lines. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times ran extensive reports essentially debunking the accusation. If anything, that only fueled the controversy, convincing many African Americans that there is a conspiracy to cover up the charges. Juanita Millender McDonald, who won a special election to Congress last spring representing Compton and Watts, invited John Deutsch, the director of the CIA, to take part in a town hall meeting in south central Los Angeles. Nothing like it had ever happened before. But to everyone's surprise, Director Deutsch accepted. That meeting took place late today. Our cameras were there, and Judy Mullo reports on what happened.
For this unprecedented talk by a CIA director, unprecedented security. At Locke High School in Watts, heavily armed police officers surrounded the school. Helicopters hovered overhead, and SWAT team members kept watch on the roof. As the arriving audience passed through magnetometers, John Deutsch arrived in a heavily guarded motorcade. He was introduced by a local congresswoman with a challenge.
It is not up to us to prove the CIA was involved in drug trafficking in south central Los Angeles, whether, or rather, it is up to them to prove that they were not.
The hostility from the audience was apparent from the moment Deutsch rose to speak.
Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Deutsch. Please, if you don't want to give the respect, then you might want to exit at this time.
After order was restored, Deutsch began by expressing empathy with the community's anger.
I understand that people are suspicious of the CIA. In the course of recruiting agents to penetrate drug cartels, to break up those groups that bring drugs to the United States, our case officers, our men and women, deal with bad people, very bad people, sometimes at great risk to their lives. Now, it is alleged the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California. It is an appalling charge. It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. It is a charge that cannot go unanswered.
He promised a full investigation by the CIA's Inspector General.
As of today, we have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America during this or any other period. However, I am going to wait and see what the results are of this Inspector General's investigation. If any wrongdoing is discovered, we will pursue it, and those responsible will be brought to justice.
From the get-go, the questions were tough. A graduate of Tuskegee University wanted to know why the government would come clean in the cocaine issue when it had covered up medical experiments at her school.
I'd like to know how this incident differs from my school, what happened at my school at Tuskegee University, where for 20 years the government denied inflicting syphilis among African-American men.
20 years ago, those horrors took place, and I share the revulsion about them. I hate it as much as you hate it. But let me say something else. There was nobody who came forward 20 years ago and said they were going to investigate it.
A number of people expressed anguish about the devastation caused in their communities by crack cocaine.
In Baldwin Village, where I live, there are no jobs for the children, and our kids are commodities. They are being cycled through the prisons They come back to the street and they're marked and scarred for the rest of their life.
You, the president, and everybody else should be highly upset and say, how did this cancer get here?
How are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
The Inspector General is established by law to look independently about wrongdoing in the CIA.
But the audience was not appeased. Some called for the president to appoint an independent counsel.
These resources of the Inspector General could be used by an independent counsel in an investigation. Why don't you turn it over to an independent counsel?
The reason for not using an independent counsel is there's been no criminal complaint filed here.
While the crowd often jeered Deutsch, they cheered this man, a former LAPD officer who claimed he'd been a narcotics detective.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
If in the course of the IG's investigations and Fred Hitz's work, you come across evidence of severely criminal activity,
Let him speak into
and
the
it's
mic.
classified, will you use that classification to hide the criminal activity, or will you tell the American people the truth?
If this information turns up wrongdoing, we will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
Deutsch seemed puzzled by some questions, and he dodged others, especially those that dealt with specific allegations about CIA connections to drug dealers. The hostility in the audience did not abate. In fact, it seemed to grow. Ted?
Judy Muller, thank you. Just when it seemed that the room couldn't become any more hostile, it did, as you'll see when Judy Muller's report continues.
As Deutsch rose to leave, he tried to put the best face on a chaotic evening.
Thank you for letting me come here today. You know, I've learned something. I've learned how important it is for our government and for our agency to get on top of this problem and stop it. I just want to say that I came today to try and describe the approach that I'm taking to address these serious charges. But I go away with a better appreciation of what's on your mind, and I go away with a conviction that we're going to do more to stop drugs from coming into the United States. Thank you very much.
While this visit may have been frustrating for Deutsch, and while it may have done nothing to alter the crowd's skepticism, it marks a dramatic change for the CIA. Never before has this most private of agencies ventured into such a public forum.